And welcome to Nurses and Hypochondriacs, Charley Karlotta.
Hello. Hi there.
Hi. So Charley, I saw your show last weekend, and your show is Nursing is My Life, a one woman's story of how nursing sucks.
Yeah,
I sat in the front row and it was totally relatable to me. I loved it.
I'm glad you were there. I'm glad you liked it. It's one woman's story. It's my story, but I think a lot of nurses can relate to it. Not everybody would agree with everything I say, but this is my story, my experience, and what I've also gathered from other nurses I've worked with over the 100 years I've been a nurse. So yeah, I just wanted to. I came out here. I'm originally from Wisconsin my whole life, and I came out here 12 years ago because I wanted to give my kids a chance to get into the entertainment business, because they were, as I raised them, it turns out that they had the same kind of passions that I did growing up for singing, dancing, acting. My son was a piano prodigy, and he wanted to write music for film or perhaps make films. So he got his master's in cinematic arts from USC. And my daughter also, she did quite a bit of acting. And so ever since I came out here, I still had to work as a nurse full time because I'm a kind of a paycheck to paycheck person. And my kids were like, well, Mom, you always wanted to do things like this. I mean, originally that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an entertainer, particularly a dancer. And so I went to iOS Theater, and I took the whole year-long program. There were 7 classes. And when I graduated, we put on shows, and I just was like in heaven. I was just so happy. And I took commercial classes. I did a few things. And it was quite limited because, again, I have to work full time. So then I became interested in putting on a one-woman show. I actually had another show that I did, and then I decided to do a show about nursing. So that's how that came to be.
That's awesome. What was your other show that you did?
My other show was more about my life. And I talk about nursing a little bit. And it was more of a cabaret show. I had a band, and I sang a lot more songs than I do in this show.
Oh my gosh, that's cool. Yeah, I love the singing, and I love the piano, and I love how you refer to the piano guy who is your son, right?
Right.
How you refer to him for your lines, which I loved. And I texted you that it so reminded me of Linda Lavin's. I know her name is Linda Lavin. My Jewish friend Abby corrected me. She's like, it's Linda Lavin. And she played Alice back in the day. And I went to go see a show in 2017 it was at the Palm Springs Museum, and my friend had tickets. It was a benefit show, and she was charging like $400, but it was to benefit the I forget what at this time. But anyway, she did this one woman show, and she wore this sparkly outfit with the most beautiful shoes. And she had this piano guy that she had been with for forever, and he knew her whole life story. And so when she would forget something, she would refer to him, and she'd be like, remember that time in Poughkeepsie? And then he would kind of have a story and kind of go into song, which was so great. And that totally reminded me of your show. I was like, oh yeah, you got to keep that in there. It's so fun. And I saw another reviewer wrote the same thing. They said, I loved it when she referred to the piano guy about her lines and what's next and stuff, and it's so great because he's your son, because he's been there the whole time. Oh yeah, I remember when you told me that story, Mom. Or so that's great. So how did you again come about with the whole nursing thing? Like, did you want to educate? Did you just need an outlet creatively? I mean, because for me, and I'll give you that example. I know we were talking a little bit about this before the show. I just was creatively frustrated, I think, when I was a nurse and working, and I had always done theater. I'd always done photography. Like when I was in high school, I let's see, what else did I do? Oh, I was really big into writing. I used to do a lot of poetry. And then when I went to nursing school, I shut that all down. And I had absolutely almost no creative outlet. And I wanted to pick it up again. And I talk about this on Heather's show because we had so much in common, where I wanted to do community theater and I had been married at the time and my ex-husband was against it. So like, well, that was the end of that. And so, and it wasn't until, like I told you, in 2008 that I found these writing classes that were more for me. And that was just the end of it. And I mean, I never would have imagined where this would take me, and that it's been taking me this far so far. But going back to you, were you wanting a creative outlet? Was there this other persona inside of you, like your children noticed it?
Well, it was really both. I needed a creative outlet. And I also wanted to let people know what nursing was really like. But getting back to the creative outlet, since I was a kid, I would play my mother's albums. She had, Camelot, West Side Story, and I'd sing to them. I'd memorize every line. And I just did that on my own, like at 5, 6 years old. And I begged to take dance lessons. And so they let me take dance lessons and, ballet and tap and then jazz. And I mean, that was when I was the happiest. And they did not promote that. If I had to beg them to come to the dance recital, and I was later, like when I was in college, I was actually a theater major, and oh my gosh, they were so against that. Like, what are you going to do with that? You'll never get a job. And even back then, even since high school, they were pushing me to be a nurse. Because I go back far enough that, when a young woman graduated from high school, she married her boyfriend, or she became a nurse or a secretary or a teacher. It didn't mean you couldn't be a doctor or a lawyer or, an engineer, but it was just very rare back then. And I didn't have the confidence to go against my parents. I just like, so my first degree, Bachelor of Arts, was going to be in theater. And then halfway through, I switched my major to communication because my parents were like, that doesn't sound as bad as theater. And then when I graduated, even though I had been in plays, my parents never came to one play. And I was also a pom-pom girl in high school and college. And I just loved that. It was just like, I was raised like I didn't have confidence. I didn't have, much self-esteem. So I ended up, after doing all that, doing what my parents told me to do. And I went back to school and I went into an accelerated program for, people who already had a bachelor's degree. So I got my RN in 2 years. And then it was a diploma school for people who already went to college. And then I got my BS in nursing. So, and then I always did it like in the back of my mind, well, you know what, at least I can do something. I can make money at something. And then I'll go out to LA and try to, be a dancer. And of course that never happened because I just didn't have that kind of confidence. And then as the years went by, I ended up singing in some different bands. So that was an outlet. Yeah, I sang, it was a country band, and an old time, like really, it was an old man from our church. And they had all these old songs and polka songs and things like that. I didn't even know any of them. I wasn't familiar with them. And then from there, I was with another country band. And then after that, I ended up doing jazz and Dixieland jazz.
Oh, cool.
And again, it was limited because it was hard to stay out till 2 a.m. and be at work at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning. And that was really the only thing. I didn't do community theater or anything because it was just too hard with my schedule, to do that. So that's why at first when I came out here with my kids, I didn't do anything as far as, taking any lessons or, I end up also, I went to, took lessons and I became a stand-up comic. I did that, but it took me a while because I was like, oh, I'm too old now. It's not going to happen and just forget it. My kids were so supportive. Mom, just do it. Just do it.
That's awesome. I love it.
And they would come to my shows. And I mean, and now too, they're just so supportive of me. They're just
that's so great.
Wonderful. So there's that. And the other thing is, all the time I've been in nursing, I've been just so frustrated that I think nurses do so much. And to be a good nurse, I think you have to be very smart. And most people have no idea what we do. And there's some people that are very respectful of nurses, but boy, there's a lot that aren't, or it's not that they're disrespectful necessarily, but they just they think, oh, you just stand around and pass pills,
right.
And they have no idea that, I try and tell them, you could have the best doctor in the world, but if you don't have good nurses, you're sunk. So that was part of the reason I decided after I had done one show that, I think I could do another one and I could do it about nursing. And I struggled to make it entertaining, that it wasn't going to be lecturing or it wasn't going to be preaching to the choir. So that was, it's kind of a long explanation, but that's what motivated me.
Yeah, I love it. And I can so relate to you. When I was a kid, I remember being about 5 years old and getting my first album, which was Andy Gibb. And I had this little Raggedy Ann record player, and I used to play it or on my parents' stereo, and I would listen to Olivia Newton-John. And then my brother and I would con my mother into going to the library and checking out Eddie Murphy's records for us. So we'd sit in the closet, my brother and I, because they were rated R. So we'd sit in the closet and we'd think my mother couldn't hear, and we just would sit there and just laugh and laugh. And my mother didn't care because she was just like, well, my house is clean and they're out of my hair. So they just locked themselves in the closet, and we would sit there for hours, and I loved it. And to this day, it's like, I thank Eddie Murphy. I've done some comedy too, but I used to go to a safe space to be doing comedy because I didn't want to be heckled. And that was one of the things that I tried as well. But yeah, I mean, it's such a release. Nursing is a very, very hard profession. And we're seeing the whole healthcare industry just falling apart like a house of cards right now. With everything that's going on, especially in nursing with the whole Radhonda Vaught case. I mean, yeah, she's just serving probation for 3 years. Are you familiar with the whole Radhonda Vaught case? Of course.
Yes.
And then the other nurses who are also being tried. I'm going to do another episode. I have a nurse advocate coming on where we're going to go more in detail with those cases. But it just also puts, even though it is a negative case, it also puts a positive spotlight on how important our jobs are. Because I hear all the time when I used to teach, my students would say, oh, I just want to be like you. I'm just going to be in nursing because I want the money and the money and the money, And I was just like, this is a crappy profession to be in it for the money, because you can just go into real estate like you did, right? When the ANA had said, oh, just go into real estate, and instead of having to go in, and you're taking care of people. I mean, and plus you did psych, right? Which is very intense. So do you want to kind of talk about that and your feelings with everything that's going on in the nursing profession right now, and why do you think this is all happening?
Okay. So first of all, most of my working life, as far as I'm concerned, I was totally grossly underpaid. Okay. Most of my life, I feel like I was grossly underpaid. When I was first a nurse, I was making $6 an hour.
Wow.
Now that, like, in equivalent, I mean, I'm going back to 1980. I hate to tell you that, but and then the equivalent of that is like $19 an hour now. So $19 an hour, you know, for having your bachelor's degree and having patients' lives in your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Hot.
and then by the time I got married in '89, I was up to $11 an hour.
Wow.
Even in the '90s, you know, it has just been like the last 10 years where the pay has gone up really well. So on the one hand, yeah, you shouldn't be a nurse to make money or to get, that is not the right attitude to have. But I'm glad we're getting paid better because I remember being in one, I worked so many jobs because a lot of times I'd work registry or pool nursing in addition to my full-time job. So I worked in so many different hospitals. And I remember some of these hospitals, there's a couple of them, and they did this movie and they talked about nursing, and like the nuns were the nurses. And it's like, you know, it's like you're doing this because you want to help people. And, you know, it could be like a religious thing, you know, and that's great. But I did not take a vow of poverty, you know.
Right. Or chastity, right?
Right. I mean, no, definitely. But you have to pay the bills, you know.
Right.
So like any job, I mean, an engineer's job is very important, and he gets paid well. And I know that because my ex-husband was an engineer. He made so much more money than I did, and their job is important. But is anybody saying to an engineer, you know, your job is really important. You don't want a building falling down on somebody. So you should do it out of the goodness of your heart and not, you know, no, everybody's
exactly. Exactly. That's a great point that you put out right there. Exactly.
So everybody has bills to pay. Everybody, not everybody, but you know, you have rent or you have your mortgage or whatever. So I'm when I talk to the young nurses today, it's like, you guys are so lucky that you're making this much money.
Right.
And so that's the way I feel about it. And but no, they shouldn't get into it because of the money. It should be that you want to get into it because you want to help people. And you know, like, I'm very interested in medicine and science, and I love biology, that kind of thing, and a lot of nurses do. But at the same time, we should be compensated correctly. And even though I got into it, I didn't want to do it because I wasn't interested and I had other interests. But when I did work as a nurse's aide when I was in college, and I found that even though, you know, this isn't what I want to do, I saw a lot of nurses, especially older nurses, with not all of them. Again, I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush, but with a really bad attitude.
Of
And I
course,
thought,
yeah.
I am not going to
I've
be
been
like
there.
that. I mean, sometimes I have a bad attitude, but I'm not going to be like that, because no matter how much I'm like, oh, I don't want to be at this job, I'm looking at a patient who's suffering, whether they just have something like an appendectomy and they're in pain, or whether they have cancer and they're dying, whatever it is, they're suffering. And I just had the attitude, I'm just going to do the best I can. And when you focus on other people, it does take your mind off of your own problems. So anyway, I tried to be a good nurse. I still try to be a good nurse. And when you do that, I think you won't hate your job as much, because you feel like you are doing something positive.
It's true. And I think having a creative outlet also helps. I mean, I think that this is what I found in my profession, that so many people that I worked with and that I would go to these conferences, with, they were just so starchy, like just very stiff, way too professional, or what they thought professional was. Everybody has their own definition of what professional
Mhm.
is. Because I've been told a lot of times, you're not professional. And I go, well, that's subjective. What does that mean? So are
Yeah.
you saying that a comedian is not professional? A comedian gets up and tells jokes. I work in pediatrics, I work with kids. I can't be starchy and stiff. I have to be fun, because the kids I
Yeah.
got to get into
Mhm.
that flow. I got to get into that energy. And I see anybody from 0 to 21 years old. So a lot of my colleagues are in the same, but I go to these conferences. I'm like, this is the most boringest conference I've ever been to. And I have friends that are kind of like me, same type of personality. They hate it and they look around. They're like, "Do you think we look like that?" And I'm like, "I know I don't." So for sure. I mean, even when I started Nurses and Hypochondriacs, they were like, "I can't believe you named your show that, and I can't believe you're doing a show, and I can't believe." And look at now what's going on with TikTok and media. I got in trouble. I got pulled into the office. I remember in 2012 when I was working at Children's Hospital by my manager, asking me about my show. She didn't even come. I go, well, you didn't even come to the one person show. You should maybe come and check it out before you're saying, because they're like, you're not talking about your patients, are you?
Yeah, right. I'm gonna do that. Yeah.
HIPAA. I think I know HIPAA, and
Yeah.
I think I know my guidelines and stuff. But it's very interesting. But I was told by a psychic that I needed to leave that job, because I was not, if I had stayed there, I probably would have not have been a creative source, and I would have not have gone as far as I have, and really pursued that. So, but do you feel like doing your show, are your colleagues supportive?
Okay, so this is I haven't even told anybody I work with that I do this show. Yeah. I told two people and they seemed to be kind of interested, like they were kind of like fascinated, but I'm a little bit scared to do it because again, like the higher ups are like, well, that's not very professional, or I guess you're not taking your nursing job seriously. And until I get more confident,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't, yeah. So and then here, this is a funny story. So this is like 5 or 6 years ago, and I was working home health. And and I actually did a National Geographic show, and I actually had a lot of
That's
screen
awesome.
time on that show. And I never even saw it. And what's funny is, and I don't tell anybody about any of this. Well, here, my boss, she had been in Florida and she came back from vacation. She said, Charlotte, I was in Florida and I turned the TV on and there you were. And I saw you on TV on National Geographic. And I'm like, oh my God, what is the chance with that? Oh
She
God,
discovered you. You're like, that's not me.
yeah.
Someone who looks like me. That's my doppelganger.
But to my surprise, she thought that was pretty cool. So
Yeah. It's funny. People think it's pretty cool. Like now I promote my show all the time. I have flyers everywhere I go. I work locum. So I'm at a different practice or a different federally qualified clinic, and I hand out my flyers all the time, and people love it, because a lot of the times too, what I encounter are the same types of personalities who do want to create but are scared. They don't think they're creative. I mean, everybody is creative in some way. We're all creative beings as humans. But I feel that, and you'll maybe this can help you as well, because you're doing something. It also empowers someone else to do something as well, and says, "Oh well, she did it. I guess I can do it too," and that's how I started myself in writing. I would follow my friend Abby. Actually, I would stalk her to anywhere she was going. Like she'd go up to do stand-up storytelling, she'd do stand-up, and I would just be there at her shows. And I started to become more and more confident to do things, and I was like, well, if she could do it, I can do it too. And she was just such an empowering force. and stuff. But yeah, if that can help. But let's talk about Tony Robbins. So part of your journey, which I love how you wrote in your handout or your program, as I should call it, and how this has been this hero's journey of sorts that you've been on with your nursing and with your creative and acting and just putting yourself out there. What I like is science is just now starting to verify this phenomena about the whole mind body connection, having witnessed many unexplained occurrences in your career. I'm all about that. And I've had several people on the show talking about serendipity, synchronicities. I just had a quantum physicist on explaining timeline jumps and all of that. From your show, it's very relatable to me on your hero's journey on gaining this confidence. And so can you talk a little bit more about that and Tony Robbins?
Well, I knew Tony Robbins a long time ago. It was 1988. I had been seeing a therapist because I have my own personal crap I was dealing with. And like I say, most of it is just not having the confidence. And he told me about Tony Robbins. So he happened to be this is when he was kind of starting out, and he was in Waukesha at the, I forgot what they call it, he was an Expo Center, I think it's called, and which is just 15 minutes from my hometown. And I went there and I did the fire walk and all of that. And I was amazed because I realized that I was the one limiting myself.
Yeah.
Even though my parents were my parents, and I know they did that out of love. I know they did it out of love. It wasn't like they were trying to,
also their own programming on what society thinks is right and society thinks like what you should be doing, because that's just very basic. You get a career, you become a homemaker, you have children, you get married, you have children, and then you retire and maybe you travel and then you die. Yeah. So that's basically what people think life is. In olden times, that's what everybody did. Like,
right. So I was just amazed to discover that it's your own thoughts.
Yes.
And then I even went out and I had to work really hard, but I made enough money to go out to Del Mar, California. At that time, he had a castle in Del Mar, and he had a seminar right in his house. He called it his castle. It looked like a medieval castle.
I love it.
And this guy from his book was there, and I'm sorry, I can't quite remember his name, but he was featured in one of his first books. I met so many interesting people that were on their own journeys and trying to improve their lives. And it was a whole weekend. And I came back and I felt like a different person.
Yeah.
And then after that, so many things fell into place for me. I wanted to get married and have children. I always wanted to be a mother. And I hardly dated at all because I had such low self-worth. And after I went there, all of a sudden, this one guy comes into my life, and we end up getting married. And then I had already owned a house. I had already bought a house on my own. But anyway, then I had a really, nice house with him, and I had my children. And I never, a year before that, I never would have thought any of that would have happened. And then I got into real estate. I did that because I feel like all my life I've been trying to get out of nursing, but so I did that for a while, and I was having some success at that. And and then I realized too, like in my nursing career, I've seen, like I mentioned, I've seen so many unexplained things. And when I would like to be able to like interview these patients, and really find out a lot about them, but it wouldn't be appropriate, the way things were in the hospital. But just a little bit I saw, or the little bit they said, and it's mostly whether they knew they were doing it or not, it was their thinking, I think,
Yes.
that got them well. And it was just really amazing. Although I have to say, I think there's more variables involved in it that I don't, like I've read a lot of different kind of books about it. Sometimes you see someone, they seem to be thinking the way you think someone should think if they want to get better, and unfortunately it doesn't work. So I think there's other variables as well that go into it, but I have seen just unbelievable things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. That's cool. So, yeah, I can relate to that as well. For example, I had a little 2-year-old patient come in. I told this on my TikTok, and she comes in for an ER follow-up with her mother. She only speaks Spanish, and the diagnosis was Bell's palsy, which is weird in a 2-year-old. It's rare, and so I think it was the right side of her face or the left side of her face was numb. I don't remember now. And I went in and they had treated her in the ER, and I asked the little girl what happened to her in Spanish, and she goes, "Me pegó una niña," and I was just like, "Oh, okay." And so the mother kind of starts to chuckle, and she goes, "Oh, a couple months ago, she was playing with this little girl, and she doesn't play with other children. She's always with me alone. She tried to grab this little girl's toy, and the little girl slapped her in the face. And she's never forgotten about it. Like, she's become obsessed about it. So it's very interesting that all of a sudden she gets Bell's palsy in that side of the face. So I've started to do research on it, and I came across this woman's video on trauma and how it gets stored with the trigeminal nerve and the vagus nerve, which innervates throughout the whole body. And I'm also a part of this group on with trauma survivors, and there's many therapists on there, and we talk about just different case studies. And so one of them said, well, that looks like it was an imprint in her brain. Like, her body remembered this trauma so much that her vagus nerve, it's just, it is a traumatic memory that she held on to, which was very, very fascinating how that happens, and how our bodies are these amazing intelligent systems that can do that, and just hold on to stuff that we don't even realize, and everything. But very cool stuff. Healthcare is cool. It's a great thing that we can put our creativity and nursing and healthcare together. So what are your future plans? You have a couple more shows going on at the Fringe, right? Is it one more show or two more shows, right?
Those.
Awesome. Tell us when those are, because this will come out this week, the podcast. So if people would like to come, I'm going to go ahead and link your Fringe link to the episode so people can buy tickets. I think it's the 18th, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I have it right here.
Saturday, the 18th at 8:15.
And Sunday, June 26th at 1:30 p.m. And that's the Zephyr Theater on Melrose, 7456 Melrose Avenue in West Hollywood.
Yes.
Which was great. I love that theater. It was great. I love how it's set up. It's very comfy. It's cozy. It's perfect for a one-person show. It's great.
Yeah, I love it there too. And the people that run it are really great.
Yeah, and that's the whole big thing with the Fringe is the people who run the theaters are great. The one when I did my show, it wasn't so great. So which I had to learn it was part of my journey. I got yelled at. My show would go over time. I didn't know how to produce because I was producing other people. And so I did make the mistake of having some interesting people come on, but decided to make my show their show. And so they would take a lot of time and not listen to the time person.
Oh,
get off stage after they told their story. So which was very interesting. Like I said, I'm glad that that happened. Now at the time it was very traumatic for me, but looking back now, I'm glad that that happened. I have tons of stuff to write about on what to do and what not to do, and it just makes for so much of a greater story. But yeah, the people running the theaters really make it, and it's a good thing you have good people, and you have a great director as
yeah,
well.
Jessica Lynn Johnson, nobody better. I started with her from the beginning, and what I just love about her is she's just so encouraging, so encouraging. And because I really didn't know if I wanted to do any of this. And she has just helped me so much. I can't say enough about her.
That's awesome. So what are your future plans then after the show ends? What are you going to be doing? Are you going to be still creating, producing? I mean, I'm getting more, this is what my intuitive sense is saying, more commercial work for you. I see commercials coming down the pipeline for you. I do. That's what I kept seeing. I go, commercial. So there.
Oh, well, that would be nice. I mean, right now I'm still working full time, and I'll be at this particular hospital. The thing is that I don't think people realize, like, and this is just real quick aside, is people think, oh, you can get a job anywhere, you can always get a job. And that's another fallacy that I talk about in my show. And especially the older you get, you're more limited. So I'm kind of going to keep working where I'm working because they like me there. So
Yeah.
and I do like everybody I work with. I work with a really good bunch of nurses and workers. So right now, that's what I'm going to do. I would like to do my show again. And every time I do it, I think of ways I can improve it. So I think I would look for another venue to do my show again. And in the past, I haven't been very good at marketing. And part of the reason why is I'm like, I don't know if my show's good enough. And now I feel more confident about it, that I can do the marketing or have someone help me do it and, have bigger audiences. And I would like to keep doing my show. I would like, and I hope that I'd like to be an advocate for nursing to get, help be more of a support for nurses, if that's the right thing to say, an advocate for nurses. And I think the better we nurses do, the better the patient care is. And that's, it's not just a selfish thing for nursing. If nurses are staffed the way they should be staffed, the patient care is so much better. But I took commercial classes. If I could do commercials, I would just be thrilled.
I know, that's what I kept seeing. So we'll talk a little bit more about it after the show. I'll give you my spidey sense insights that I do. All right. So thank you so much, Charley, for being on the show. And here we go. See, I am helping you market.
Yes, you are. I'm so glad
you put it out there. You put it out there. And so we'll send out the show. I'll also put you on my email list and tell your story. So cool. So till next time, nurses and hypochondriacs, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.